Hey, I'm Zannerman. Beyond Skyrim Bruma is a mod for Skyrim uploaded on the Nexus in 2017. The mod features the city of Bruma in Cyrodiil and its vicinity. The mod contains over 40 locations to explore and plenty of quests. It took me about 25 hours to complete everything, although I played with a fresh level 1 character who struggled at the start, so your own time to complete may vary. The mod is part of a greater modding project called Beyond Skyrim. The project aims to recreate the other provinces of Tamriel in the Skyrim engine. Beyond Skyrim is split into separate projects, where each one focuses on a different province or region. Unlike Skywind or Skyblivion, that aim to remake Morrowind or Oblivion in the Skyrim engine, the Beyond Skyrim project attempts to model the world of Tamriel as it would be like in the 4th era, when Skyrim takes place. Beyond Skyrim Bruma is part of the Cyrodiil project, and is what they call a pre-release. What that means is that it functions as a proof of concept for the project, where they release a smaller part of the planned gameplay area. So far, it's also the only one of the Beyond Skyrim pre-releases to actually release. The provinces under development are Cyrodiil, which covers the Imperial Province and areas that were playable in Elder Scrolls Oblivion. This project seems to be the furthest along out of all the projects so far. Iliac Bay, which takes place in High Rock, covering the areas that were playable in Elder Scrolls Daggerfall. Its supposed pre-release is called Three Kingdoms. Elsewhere, covering the province and homeland of the Khajiit. Its pre-release is called Greater Rim. Morrowind, that covers the province of Morrowind, home of the Dark Elves, still rebuilding after the events of the Red Year. Its pre-release is the New North. Then we have Argonia, or Blackmarsh, home of the Argonians, Roscria, an island in the Sea of Ghosts, Atmora, a frozen continent across the Sea of Ghosts to the north, Valenwood, home of the Wood Elves, which seems to have not started work yet, Alinor and the Somerset Isles, which also seems to only be in the planning stages. Beyond Skyrim Bruma is not just a mod of Bruma, but in a way it represents the feasibility of the whole Beyond Skyrim project. The Bruma release no doubt helped garner a lot of support and modders to the project, not to mention showcasing the level and quality to expect from a future full release. It is an enjoyable mod, but it does feel unfinished. I would recommend you play through it yourselves before watching this video. This video will contain spoilers for the mod and will spoil some quests. The mod begins when you head towards the border between Cyrodiil and Skyrim, following the road up past Helgen. At the border gates you find a Legion outpost blocking your way. Due to the civil war in Skyrim, the Legion has closed the border to stop the civil war from spilling over into Cyrodiil, which means that you won't be able to enter straight away either. There are several ways you can cross the border. One is by convincing the Legion commander Durius to let you through by either having a notable achievement or by claiming you are with the Legion. You can also attack the Legion outpost and fight your way through. Or you can take a secret smuggler's passage through a dungeon called the Serpent's Trail. You can find an NPC, Mirich Ran, near the Imperial outpost that can tell you about this smuggler route and give you some background to it. Up front, this shows that the Beyond Skyrim team tries to implement different solutions to overcoming problems, not just a single way forward. The problem of crossing the border is also implemented in a believable way. It is plausible that the Legion would be guarding the border, especially with Stormcloak uprising. So unless you are already renowned, you will probably have to take the path through the mines of Serpent's Trail. In the Serpent's Trail you fight your way through a ruined and abandoned Imperial fort, now occupied by smugglers and goblins. If you're a low level, you can actually find some decent items here. The smugglers have barrels called smuggled goods that often contains dwarven equipment. By the time I was through the trail, I'd acquired a dwarven bow and a dwarven war axe, which saw me through the start of my playthrough. Once you pass through Serpent's Trail, you enter into the Bruma world space. The first places you are likely to come across are Fort Pale Pass, an Imperial fort, and the inn Snowstone's Rest. The inn serves as a small introduction to Bruma, and the bandit gang Thorina's Cutters are mentioned. When you head down the mountain, you encounter two of Thorina's Cutters that have just ambushed a cart. So my initial impression was that Thorina's cutters would be one of the main antagonists of the region. But, aside from a few small mentions or some small encounters, they're not really a big thing, outside from one single dungeon and a quest. Once you head down into the valley, you'll sooner or later arrive at the city of Bruma. In Bruma, you can pick up several quests. In general, I do think the quests are good, or at worst at the levels of regular Skyrim. There are plenty of quests that take place in Bruma, so you have some easy quests to start your adventure with that don't take you outside the city walls. There are several uses of the persuasion skill in some quests and when talking to NPCs. The quests are also all self-contained to the Bruma world space. There is no need for you to go back to Skyrim for any of the quests, as you'll find everything you need in Bruma, be that ancient Nordic weapons or bear pelts. Well, there isn't a main quest, and the quests in the mod all feel like side quests. Even if some quests tackle bigger issues in the region, or multiple quests handle the same topic, there is a slightly longer quest chain involving Guard Captain Aldius. The issues from Skyrim are nicely implemented in Bruma. There are several quests that relate to the Stormcloaks and the war in Skyrim, or the Thalmor and the ban on Talos worship. The legate of the Imperial Fort, for instance, asks you to interrogate a Stormcloak prisoner. You're given a choice to either help the Legion or help the Stormcloak prisoner. If you choose to help the Legion and interrogate the prisoner Bjarni, the fort will come under attack by the Stormcloaks, and you can hand him over to the Penitus Oculatus, or turn on the agents at the last moment. If you instead choose to help Bjarni escape, you're able to stage a prison escape together with all the prisoners. A detail I really appreciated here is that the prisoners come with nothing but the rough clothes on their back, but you can equip them with weapons and armor from your inventory. In the prison break scenario, you don't meet the other Stormcloaks, but as you enter the courtyard, you are faced with the Legion Captain and the Penitus Oculatus agents. Another thing I appreciated is that the Legion Captain Darius shows disappointment in you for backstabbing them. It actually made me feel a bit bad for taking this route, but you'll have to fight your way through if you want to escape. This is not the only instance of stories featuring Stormcloaks. Scattered around the map you can find several dead Stormcloaks, who had their supply keys mixed up, like a treasure hunt of sorts. You also have a quest to find a missing husband, who tried to turn traitor and join the Stormcloaks, but ended up dying, and a quest to aid a Stormcloak sympathizer collect a report from a waylaid courier from Skyrim. Some of these quests, like helping Olaf find the report in a bandit hideout, have several different paths you can take, depending on your allegiance. You can choose to help the Stormcloaks, you can bring the reports back to the Empire, burn them, or take them to the Thalmor. Some other quests give you options, and the available options show in your quest journal. So they aren't exactly hidden options, which I think is a good thing. Skyrim is not a game that asks you to engage with the quests at a more involved level, like Elex or Baldur's Gate 3 for instance. There are rarely any other ways to solve quests than one. It'd be fair design for those games to have hidden ways to proceed, but in Skyrim, the expectation is not there. If the alternative solutions were hidden, players would not know to expect or to look for alternative solutions. I think the best decision is therefore to highlight all the available options to the player, but sometimes it is strange to have a list of options show up, options that you might not have figured as obvious, like in the case of stopping the Penitus Oculatus agents before they take Bjarni away. You had already sided with the Empire for long enough to get to that point, so the choice to stop the Imperial secret police seems to come out of nowhere. One of the quests also leads you to getting a companion. Helping the Khajiit D'Artagnan convince Aldius of his innocence, D'Artagnan will be exiled from Bruma, and you can ask him to join you as a companion, which is very nice. He does have some commentary, but nothing that a dedicated follower mod wouldn't blow out of the water. It's still a very nice touch. Now, there were some parts of the quests I didn't like as much. Some quests are designed purely with map markers in mind, and I'm thinking specifically of the Fighters Guild poster quest. Technically, it is possible to complete it without map markers, but it's not really a feasible task. There's no mark on the wall, or dialogue directives to where the posters are to be hung up, so you only have the map markers to go by. There is also a quest where you help Dumrag the Orc find out what happened to his missing wife Atul. Turns out the wife was kidnapped by a Breton noble, by the name of Simon Gauthier and somehow fell in love with him, or got Stockholm syndromed over the past year to fall in love with him. It's kind of unclear. Although I don't think the mod developers intended for that interpretation, because it's a lot tougher of a subject than just adultery. But my main point of criticism is that once you do confront them with Dumrag, there is little follow-up after the quest. If you choose to spare them or choose to kill Simon, you can't talk to anyone about what just happened. A lack of follow-up plagues other quests too, and it is noticeable when it is absent. I also have some nitpicks about Cloud Ruler Temple and the quest that relates to it. The quest itself was very short and slightly anticlimactic. For a faction that has as much narrative weight as the Blades, the quest that related to their headquarters feels too small, too insignificant. By narrative weight, I mean that the Blades have been featured in the main quest of every Elder Scrolls game I've experienced, which would be Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. They are a big part of the narrative for the Elder Scrolls, and this quest just didn't seem to do them justice, just based on the importance to the narrative they had in previous titles. In the case of the Blades quest, it feels like a footnote, and it doesn't change almost anything about the world. The length of this segment about Cloud Ruler Temple is probably as long as the time it takes to complete the quest itself. There's just not enough there to hook you, or even any sort of challenge to overcome. Another issue is that you're able to get the Blades armor and weapons from the temple, which isn't locked behind a combat encounter or quest. Nothing stops you from getting this gear at level 1. It's just laying there. I did like that the NPCs recognize your armor and comment on it. I used the weapons and armor from Cloud Ruler Temple for the rest of my playthrough of Bruma, because it was better than any other weapon or armor I came across, on par with Orcish. I don't know their plans for the full release, or if they have gone back to redo some areas and quests of Bruma, but I do hope they take a second pass at Cloud Ruler Temple. Maybe Thalmor blocked the way into the temple, or a former Blades agent wants to reclaim it and put the spirits of their former companions to rest, which could lead into the quests already there. I also found the ending to the Frostcrag Spire quest anticlimactic. I get why they do it, and I get the purpose of the quest is less to find some wrongdoing, and more to introduce the faction of the College of Whispers. But there is this build-up to a mystery about an ancient tower full of magic. I suppose I expected puzzles, and traps, and magical guardians. But when you reach the tower, it is occupied by the College of Whispers. You speak to them and can immediately convince them to stop teleporting items into Bruma. No problem to overcome, just an easy speech check. I suppose I expected more from the build-up, and the instant loss of tension and mystery, it was just jarring. I think this is another issue of a quest being ripped out of a greater whole, and may have a planned continuation in a full release. But as it stands right now, it's unsatisfying. While there is no main questline, Captain Aldius' series of quests passes for what I consider to be the region's main storyline. His quest has 3 main arcs. You help him catch a relic thief, you help him hide some Talos worshippers, and you help him deal with Therina and her gang of bandits. The ending, however, leaves some things on a cliffhanger, and some narrative elements I take issue with in regards to how it plays out. After you help him deal with Therina's cutters, you are presented to the Count and given a reward and the right to purchase a home in Bruma. As Aldius escorts you out of the castle, the Thalmor are waiting for him. They paralyze you and take Captain Aldius to their prison for Talos worshippers. Now, aside from stripping you of agency with the paralyzation, I do have some other issues. The idea that the Thalmor can just take anyone off the streets in the name of the outlaw of Talos worship is pretty dumb, because they aren't just taking anyone, they're taking the captain of the guard of the city of Bruma, and the head of security of the city, and someone who has recently been doing very well in cleaning out the bandits and finding someone to track down stolen relics. This is someone high-ranking in Bruma society, with powerful friends and well-respected, who has information on county security, military matters, and likely county secrets. Unless done with the approval of the Count, which perhaps would mitigate some of my criticism, a move like this by the Thalmor should by all rights be a cause for a lot of political backlash. I'm not well versed in the amount of political or policing power that the Thalmor have in Cyrodiil, and that is also partially open to the mod team's interpretation. But you can't talk to the Count about it. The Thalmor don't say anything about the Count having approved such a measure, The Thalmor use paralysis to halt player agency. The Thalmor also use teleportation magic for them to instantly get out of Bruma, because the guards sure wouldn't just let them walk out the gate with their guard captain in chains. Now, a brief aside. I really dislike teleportation magic used in fantasy. It feels cheap, makes everything more ephemeral. Enemies can appear out of thin air anywhere, at any time, and they can escape from anywhere at any time. Oftentimes, teleportation magic just feels like a lazy way for developers to have a forced story beat happen. It removes any agency from the rest of the world to react to events. The mod uses teleportation magic in 3 instances, as far as I'm aware. Once here with the Thalmor, and once when the Penitus Oculatus agents collect Bjarni, and once during the Synod questline, with items appearing in the guild hall. The last of these, with the Synod, I have far fewer issues with, because that is static teleportation. It has clear rules. It can only happen from one teleportation circle to another. The other 2 instances have significantly fewer limitations. It also goes against the Synod questline because they were trying to rediscover how teleportation magic works there. All of these nitpicks and the narrative surrounding this event, as I understand it, makes Oldius's imprisonment feel like a cheap drama moment. The mod does make it quite clear that this storyline is not finished completely. It can't be finished completely because the rest of the Cyrodiil project is not finished yet. So I only have thoughts about what exists in playable form, and I don't think the ending of Oldius's questline was done particularly well. Let's talk a bit about the level design. The world spaces of Bruma are well detailed. There is some really good environmental storytelling to be found. In Serpent's Trail, for instance, you come across a room where there are several dead smugglers, and among those smugglers you find a goblin sword on the ground. So you can come to the conclusion that it must have been goblins that killed the smugglers. And you do find goblins further into the cave. It's small details that bring the mod to life, like the torture in not wanting to talk next to the prisoner you are interrogating, or the conversation between NPCs in Bruma. It shows that passion has gone into the mod, beyond the bare minimum. The world is also cordoned off into smaller areas, with designated paths between them, which helps your sense of exploration and completion. But I did find the layout of the landmass to be unintuitive despite this. There was generally only one path to get to many of the places, with few routes between them, where I perhaps expected there to be some. Some areas, mostly mountainous and caverns, were messy. There were too many rocks jutting out, and the idea is that smooth terrain equals walkable, but that's not always the case for Bruma. There was also a problem of knowing where the intended playable areas end and the unfinished parts of the landmass begin. There was no invisible wall to separate the two, and no obvious change in the landscape. The world of Bruma is populated by a variety of new creatures, or variants of creatures existing in Skyrim, and you'll encounter them as you explore. Wolves, bears, and mud crabs all have new Cyrodiilic variants, but there are also new monsters. Ogres that use the giant skeleton, Ayleid wights, minotaurs, and zombies that use the Draugr skeleton, goblins that use the Falmer skeleton, and then there are mountain lions and scamps, not to mention new factions of humanoid enemies. Coupled together with some of Skyrim's existing creature variety, and it makes for a varied roster to fight. I think the dungeons were a highlight for me. I liked that they often had twists to them, or a good central idea. Many dungeons evolve as you venture deeper. You may initially be fighting rats and bears, until you stumble into a den of vampires. Dungeons had striking visuals, like the ice cave or the frostfire glade, or the keep in Cuthbert's hideout. The dungeons share names with dungeons from Oblivion, but their layout may not be the same as what you're used to from that game. The dungeons were more sprawling than vanilla dungeons. By sprawling, I mean that they had more branching paths, and it wasn't obvious which of these paths were side paths and which were the main ones. So if you like to explore everything, you may have to backtrack a lot. Sometimes their layout was confusing as well, with many side paths branching off and curling back. To help, some dungeons like Frostfire Glade use light to help guide the player. I did like the Ayleid ruins a lot. While I played Oblivion back when it was released in 2006, I don't have as much nostalgia for it as many others do. I enjoyed these new Ayleid ruins despite that, because it felt fresh and different to other dungeons found in Skyrim. And I think the Ayleid ruins fit in well in the Skyrim engine, and the few Ayleid ruins in the mod were a joy to explore. In one of these ruins, Riel, there also seems to be a hint as to what the main quest of the Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil project will be. It's also explained on their website that one of the two main quests will be the return of the Ayleid, the other main quest being the succession of the Imperial throne. However, one part I was not as keen on is that the exploration rewards and the loot in dungeons felt like they have a lot more valuable treasure compared to Skyrim. Although I have played with scarcity and Morrow loot for so long that I don't even remember what vanilla Skyrim is like. But it does feel like you were bombarded with valuables in Bruma. My playthrough of Bruma started at level 1 and ended at level 17, using the mod experience. Along the way I completed every marked dungeon and all available quests, as well as some unmarked dungeons that I think were not intended to be playable yet. So it is a pretty decent sized mod in terms of content. There were some bugs that I encountered, but some were mostly minor, or a fault of my modlist and not Bruma. The voice quality and audio was a bit inconsistent. Some audio was peaking.
Our family must always strive for bigger and better things. Not to sound like a priest of St. Martin.
And some lines were far lower than others.
Some may call it an odd hobby, but I'm proud to preserve my people's ancestry.
I heard Cetus got a new shipment from Skyrim. I wonder if he has any new Nordic artifacts.
Some voice lines also did not have any audio, or they played over incorrect lines.
I take pride in my potions. No, there aren't. Doesn't matter much to me.
Because the voice acting was so good for a mod, the few instances where there were some lesser quality or faulty lines stood out so much more. The mod also features a custom soundtrack composed by Daniel Ran and features some remastered Jeremy Soule themes from the Oblivion soundtrack. I did have some crashes as well, but I can't pin it down to Bruma because it's far more likely that it was my custom modlist that caused it. There were some landscape issues as well. The cave where you find Arantino in the Red Ruby Hollow, you can't actually get out of the water if you fall in. Some of the mountain areas feel very messy. The delineation between intended walkable space and non-intended walkable space is not made very clear. Many areas or dungeons are made with jumping in mind as well, like the Frostfire Glade or the latter parts of Sedor, which might not play well with followers unless they can teleport to you. Some tree replacers will also replace trees in the Bruma world space, and texture mods will cause missing textures in Bruma. I used two mods specifically for Bruma: Beyond Skyrim Assets Revamped 4K, which fixed a lot of purple textures caused by other mods and made it look a bit more nice, and CandlelightRogue's Bruma NPC Overhaul, which makes some of the women nicer to look at. But there wasn't a nice NPC overhaul for all the Bruma NPCs that I could find. Conclusion: Beyond Skyrim Bruma is an impressive project. It integrates almost seamlessly with the vanilla Skyrim experience. There is a lot to explore in Bruma, and just returning to Bruma and Cyrodiil in the Skyrim engine is a treat for those who have played Oblivion before. But it is also new because it's not just Oblivion in Skyrim. It is a reimagined Cyrodiil as it would be like during the time of Skyrim. Now, the risk is that it comes across as fanfiction, but if it makes the effort and is well written, it might also surpass anything that Bethesda themselves write for Elder Scrolls 6. And my opinion on Bethesda's writing is very low, so that bar is not very high. I do think Beyond Skyrim Bruma is a bit better in writing quality than Skyrim is. So would I recommend Beyond Skyrim Bruma? Yes, although be aware that it is an old mod at this point, and an unfinished experience. If you're looking for a good storyline, you won't find a complete story here. It is a chunk of a bigger project that has essentially been ripped out of the greater whole. The quests and dungeons that exist in the mod are enjoyable, but that's all the mod is for the moment. It builds up a lot, but I was left feeling unsatisfied by the unfinished nature of its narratives and the world space. It is a promising look at what the full Cyrodiil release may be one day, but big projects like this are always very risky, and may not ever see release. I do hope to play Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil one day, but I've also learned not to hype something that isn't playable. So yeah, that was all I had to say on the mod. See ya.